Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create 70s disco gold text in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions right off the bat. The first one being that you're using Photoshop CC 2015 or later. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, then some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows, so if you're using a Mac, whenever I say hit the Control key on your keyboard, that means hit the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that means hit the Option key. So with that out of the way, let's get started by creating a brand new document by hitting Control-N on the keyboard to bring up the new image dialog box. Then let's rename this as Disco Gold Text, so that we know what we're working with. And our width is 3840 pixels, our height is 2160 pixels, our resolution is 150 pixels per inch, color is RGB color 8-bit, background contents don't matter, we'll be changing that. Color profile is Adobe RGB 1998, and pixel aspect ratio is square pixels. Hit OK when you're ready, and we're ready to begin. Now, let's make sure that we set our foreground and background colors to the default black and white by hitting D on the keyboard or by clicking on the little black and white icon over here on your toolbar. Then we want to select the foreground color, and we're going to change its color to 202020, which is a very deep gray. Then we're going to hit OK because we have our deep gray. We are then going to double click on the background layer here, rename this as base, because this will be the base of our background. Hit OK, and then we're going to fill that base background with our foreground color by hitting ALT and Backspace on the keyboard. We now have a very deep gray background to work with. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the filter gallery, which is under Filter, Filter Gallery, and then we are going to apply 3 filters to our background, the first of which being Patchwork. At Patchwork, we're going to be using square size 9, relief of 15, and Patchwork can be found under Texture, Patchwork. The next one, above that, and you get to it by creating a new layer here under the Filter Gallery Layers. You just click over here and you will have a new layer to work with, and then you go to Crosshatch. Crosshatch is found under Brush Strokes, under Crosshatch. And what we're going to be using is stroke length of 33, sharpness of 13, and strength of 3. Then we are going to add another new layer here by going down to the bottom and adding another new layer, and that will be sprayed strokes. And the sprayed strokes that we're using is going to be 20, 25, so forth and so on. Let me go back here. I made a mistake there. We're going to use sprayed strokes next, and it will be stroke length of 20, sprayed radius of 25, and the stroke direction is right diagonal. Once we are ready with all of that, we are going to hit OK to apply all of that to our image. And now that our background is finished, we're ready to make a few more changes to it because this is a little bit too bright for our text to sit on. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring up our levels, which is Control-L on the keyboard, and we're going to drag the leftmost slider over here all the way down till it says 75 right here. Or you can just double click there and type in 75. Now, something to keep note of is that even though this looks nice and dark and rich, once you hit OK over here on the levels, this will brighten up. That's because this is just an estimate of what it will look like, and once it applies our levels filter, it will change the outlook. So this will get a little bit brighter, and there it is a little bit brighter. But we don't want it brighter, we want it to be darker. So the way that we're going to get that darker look is going to add an adjustment layer above our base layer. So let's go down to our adjustment layers, click on that, and let's go to Curves. Let's then go to the preset and use the darker RGB preset. That will darken everything up nicely, and we now have a nice dark background. But we want to add a little bit of color to this because it's kind of bland just being black and gray. So let's add in a new layer on top of that, and you can do that by hitting Shift Control Alt N for a new layer, or you can just click on the new layer icon down there like I just did. And let's name this Color. Okay, and then let's go to layer mode over here and let's change this to overlay. And then let's change our layer opacity down to 50%, like so. And now we are ready to add some color. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to press B on our keyboard to bring up our brush, or we can go to our tool bar over here and we can click on the brush like so. We want the brush to be at 1400 pixels or so in size. You can make it slightly bigger or slightly smaller depending on how many colors you want to add. We want to make the mode normal, opacity 100%, flow 100%. So then we're going to go over to our foreground color and we're going to choose a nice red color at the very top of this color bar over here. So somewhere around here-ish. The exact color doesn't really matter, so you can choose whatever you want. But once you pick a color, you're not going to move this. You're only going to move the slider on the right to get more colors. That way they're all in the same shade, or at least vibrance, but they're all different colors. So let's hit OK. And we will then add in a little bit of color, maybe one splotch there and one splotch up in this color corner. Then we will bring the slider from the top. Will give us a little pinky color, and we'll put that there and maybe way up there. Then we'll pick a nice blue color. Oh, no, let's go with a nice purpley color, and we'll put that over there. And another one, let's say down in this corner. You know, 2 splotches of color is pretty good for each color. A dark, and another color. Let's go with a lighter blue here. Let's stick that right in the center and right over there. Let's get another color, maybe some nice green. Yeah, green is good. Let's put this up in the upper corner down there and down there. You know, just do whatever you think works well for you, what you like, what catches your eye, what makes you happy. This really doesn't have, this is just meant to give it a little bit of color to stand out. It's not really supposed to, catch your eye very much. At least once we're done with it. So there we go. That is now our background. So let me get back to my move tool so that you see an arrow. And now we have our background already. So what we're going to do is we're going to then blur this color layer. So let's go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And we're going to make the radius, let's make it 8. To blur the colors a little bit. You could do it a little bit more if you wanted, or you can do it a little bit less. I happen to like around 8, which works very well, I think. Blends the colors nicely. Hit OK, and you now have your background ready. Let's group all 3 layers by selecting color, then holding down Shift on the keyboard and selecting the base, and then drag that down to the folder icon down here at the bottom of the layers palette and let go. It will all group together, and then we can name this background. So we now have our background. What we want to do now is actually get to the text. So the first thing that we need to do is choose a font. So let's go to our text tool by hitting T on the keyboard or by clicking on the text tool over here on your toolbar. And we are going to use a font. Now the font that I'm using is called Akka. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can download this free font for yourself. The size that I'm using is 225 points, sharp, centered. The color doesn't matter. We will be changing it, so whatever the last color is that you used on your background is fine. And then once you're ready, click anywhere on your document and then type in your text. So I'm using Pixel Magic as always. And as you can tell with most, and what is true for most free fonts, the kerning or the spacing in between the letters is almost always off. So what you need to do is fix that before you start applying any of your effects. Now the way that you fix that is you put your cursor between the letters that you want to change the kerning on or the spacing between, and then you hold down Alt and use the left and right arrows to move things closer or further apart. So that's what I am doing right now, using the left arrow to move things closer and the right arrow to move things further apart. So this looks pretty good. Maybe this E can be brought in just a little bit. And then you hit the check mark when you are ready, and you've got everything ready to go. So I'll put this in the center of my document to make it easier for everybody to see. And then what we are going to do is really, for the most part, just do layer styles. So this will be pretty much fully editable when done. You'll have to go in a little bit deeper to edit the background shine, which will come later, but the text itself will still be fully editable. So let's just go and start with our layer styles. So let's go down here to layer styles on our text layer, and we're going to start with a bevel and emboss. So let me move this up here so that you can see what we're doing. Now, what we are doing is a stroke emboss. Technique is going to be smooth. The depth is going to be 100%. Direction is going to be up. Size is 7. Soften is 0. The shading that we're going to be using is 90. Make sure use global light is unchecked before you change that. So 90 degrees, use global light is unchecked. Altitude is 30 degrees. The gloss contour is going to be this guy, which is Sawtooth 1. Then it is anti-alias is unchecked. Highlight mode is screen. We're going to be using pure white, so that's all Fs. Opacity is going to be 50%. Shadow mode is multiply. We're using all black, so that's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Opacity is 50%. And that is our bevel and emboss. Next up, we're going to be using stroke. And the stroke that we're using is going to be a size of 1. Position is going to be inside. Blend mode is going to be normal. Opacity is 70%. Overprint is unchecked. Fill type is color. And the color that we're using is going to be CC9900. Hit OK. Then the next thing that we're using is satin. So you go down here to satin, turn that on, and we're going to use a blend mode of color burn. Color is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Opacity is going to be 45%. Angle is 90 degrees. Distance is going to be 65. Size is going to be 80. The contour that we're using is called ring double. Right here, ring double. Anti-alias is checked, and also invert is checked. That means that we're inverting the ring double contour. Next up is going to be a color overlay, which is why our color for our text did not matter. We're going to be using a blend mode of normal. The color that we are using is E2AB04. Okay, and the opacity for it is going to be 100% so that it completely overwrites or covers whatever color that we had as our original text color. Next up is going to be drop shadows. Now we're going to be using 3 drop shadows, so create one and then duplicate it by just hitting the little plus. So we're going to start at the top. The first one that we're using is going to be a blend mode of normal. The color is going to be black, so that's all zeros. The opacity is 100%. Use global light is unchecked. Angle is 135 degrees. Distance is going to be 15. Spread is 0. Size is 13. The contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is 0. And layer knocks out drop shadow is checked. Then for our second drop shadow, we're going to be using linear dodge add. The color that we're using is D30808. The opacity is going to be only 50%. The angle is going to be negative 45, so that will make it look like it's coming up and to the left. The spread, the distance, well, make sure our use global light is unchecked. And the distance is 20. Spread and size are both 0. Contour is linear. Anti-alias is checked. Noise is 0. And layer knocks out drop shadow is checked. The third one is going to be blend mode of normal. The color that we're using is a nice purple, which is C13EF2. The opacity is going to be 30%. The angle is going to be also negative 45 degrees. Use global light, of course, is unchecked. Distance is going to be 39. Spread and size are both 0. Contour is linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is 0. And layer knocks out drop shadow is checked. Now, once you have all of these 7 layer styles on there, you are done. You hit OK, and this is what you should see. Now you see that you've got this nice disco-y kind of faded in look for our gold text. You got a little drop shadow down here, which helps it stand out from the background a little bit better on the bottom. And there we have disco text. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to add in a little bit more funk, a little bit more disco to this by duplicating our text layer by hitting Control-J on our keyboard to duplicate it. We're then going to bring it down underneath our text layer. So our text layer is up on top and our new text layer is underneath it. We are then going to right-click on it and convert it to a smart object. Okay, we're going to rename this as Streak 1. Okay, now the reason why we duplicated the text layer is so that we would keep all of the effects on it. Then what we are going to do is we're going to duplicate this 2 times. So hit Control-J twice, and we now have 3 streaks. And we're going to name it Streak 1, Streak 2, and Streak 3. We now have 3 streaks. So on the Streak 1, we're going to set the layer opacity to 70%. So let's change this to 70%, like that. Streak 2, we are going to change its opacity to 40%. And Streak 3, we are going to make 85%. So there, we have all 3 of our layer opacity set. And then all we're going to do is we're going to give each of these layers a layer blur that will blur them out behind our text. So let's go with Streak 1. We are going to go to blur, motion blur, so filter, blur, motion blur. Okay, once we have our motion blur, we are going to set the angle to 40 degrees, 40, and the distance that we're going to be using is going to be 250 pixels. Okay, then we hit OK. Then we go to Streak 2. We go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and we're going to make this an angle of 40 also, but the distance that we're using is going to be 600. Okay, and then for Streak 3, we are going to use Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, so Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and then we are going to make the angle negative 45, and the distance that we're using is going to be 450 pixels. Hit OK, and as you can see, we now have this disco kind of blurry crossing golden blur behind our text, and that's what we were looking for. Once we have all of that, our text is ready and it looks very disco. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. Once again, I am Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.